Tonight we're going to begin looking at the story of David and Goliath. So I'm assuming everybody here is familiar with that story, right? If you've been going to church any period of time in your life, you know the story of David and Goliath. What we're going to do with this story is probably take 3-4 weeks anyway to work our way through it, because it is a rather lengthy story. Pretty much the entirety of chapter 17 is the story of David and Goliath. And so we're going to look at it. And I want us to make some practical application in this way. And it is that recognizing that we all face giants of one sort or another in our life, how do we slay the giants? In the same way that David successfully slayed the giant, we need to slay our giants. Now, if you were to look at some things in the world today, it can be either applicable to you right now or to people in your life. What are some giants that people face? Either specifically, precisely about you or someone, or just in general, what do you see are the giants that people face in the world today? Health problems. Absolutely, Fred. Health problems. Addictions. Yep. Money problems. Family problems. Well, that would be money. I'd throw that in there with money, but so how many of you have, and it doesn't have to be a part of that list, but how many of you would say, I faced some giants in my days? How many of you would say that's true? Yeah, I'd say this is true about all of us. That in some way we face some giants. And probably, oftentimes, we were of the perspective of Israel, apart from David. Kind of cowering, not knowing what to do, fearful, not sure what the next step is, just kind of waiting on the other side of the hill, being taunted by the enemy. And so I want us to really, we're only going to look at the first 11 verses tonight. And I want us to really look at the application of this in that way. And so tonight we're going to look at the importance of, if we're going to slay our giants, the importance of knowing your enemy. Because we get this description of the tactics of the enemy before David even enters the stage, before he enters the scene, and he doesn't come in until next week in the text. And so he is making himself known to Israel prior to that in the first 11 verses. And so David is going to be the one that steps in and responds to this. But what's critical for us is to know the enemy. Now, when you name the various things that become our giants, whether it's financial relationships, health issues, divorce, whatever the long list of things would be, we would look at that as the giant, but I would say this, that's not the enemy, right? The enemy, when you're in a relationship problem, is not necessarily the other person. Who is the enemy in each of these situations? Satan's ultimately the enemy. Now, when we're standing in the middle of a battle, a relationship problem, the enemy very quickly becomes that person that we're facing off against. But in truth, the enemy, when we speak of the enemy, we're not talking about the giant. We're saying the enemy wants to use the giant in order to bring harm and damage to your life. And so knowing the enemy is what's critical, which isn't always the same thing as knowing the giant, even though in the story of David that certainly is the enemy. And so, beginning there at verse 1, it says, "Now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle, and they were gathered at Soko, which belongs to Judah." And that gives us some insight there. They are in Judah. They are taking the battle to Israel. Judah is part of Israel. Israel is in Judah. And so to say they are lined up to battle and they're in Judah, they have come on to the territory, to the land of the Israelites. They are bringing the battle to Israel. And so that tells us something about the situation that they find themselves in. And encamped between Soko and Azekah in Ephes Damim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered and encamped in the valley of Elah and drew up in a line of battle against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on the mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side with the valley between them. So if we can imagine this, half of the Philistines are on Terrace Mountain and the Israelites are on Sidling Hill. They're looking across the valley, ready to bring the battle in the middle. Now, obviously, Israel's not very keen on the idea at this point. They're not ready to do that. They're really fearful and wary of what would happen if this battle were to take place. In verse 4, and there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span, which we're talking close to 9 feet. And so this big guy, this giant, he comes out and he's going to challenge them. He's described as a champion. Now, what does that mean to you? He's a champion. What'd you say?
He's won a lot.
He's won a lot. That's right. In fact, maybe won all of them, right? Yeah. Well, they just completed the NCAA football championship. What does that mean? This is the champion. That's who beat everybody else. And so he's described in that way as a champion, meaning he's not just untested. He's been tested and he's won. This is a giant that has taken down other people. And so in the same way, when we consider the different giants that we face today, we could also look and say that those giants that you described, have they taken down other people? Have they been champions in other people's lives? Certainly. Finances, relationships, health issues have destroyed other people's lives also. And so it says this then, Verse 5, he had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze, and he had bronze armor on his legs, and the javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and his shield bearer went before him. Now, what's the significance of this description of his armor? Well, it's certainly for him just even wear this stuff is remarkable. So yeah, absolutely. What else? Why else is this critical in the story? Yeah, he's well protected, well covered. This is not somebody that's going to be easy to defeat. I mean, if this was just a guy that was 6 foot and was wearing all this stuff, it'd still be kind of an imposing sight with everything in war. But here's this giant of a guy covered in metal and protective measures that would make him seem to be absolutely impregnable. There's no way you're going to be able to get at him. And so it goes on to say in verse 8, he stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me." And so now he begins this kind of taunting of them. And he's going to carry this over even with David. But the giant is taunting the victims at this point. Now, he wants a one-on-one, mano a mano, right? Now, I think this is kind of interesting in the story because if you are Israel and you're thinking, what's our best chance of winning this? This is probably not the way I would go. I would probably think, you know what, we would be better off if we kind of stuck together. But I think there's intent in that. And it is the understanding that the odds are going to be better for the giant if he only has to face one guy. You mean Gulliver's Travel, the Lilliputans, were able to tie Gulliver up because there were so many of them. If it was just one of them, no, they couldn't have done that. And so in that same manner, the giant, Goliath, recognizes the advantage that if I can get you alone, if I can pull you away from the rest of the army, I've got a better chance of survival. Now, why would they be drawn into that? What would cause them to even think, you know what, I'll take you on? What would lead somebody to think that? Other than, don't think in terms of David, who's going to come on and save the day. But if you were a part of those armies, and you're hearing the taunting from the other end, what would possibly prompt you to take him on? Ego, yeah, ego. Just ego, arrogance.
Yeah. It stirs up your spirit, though, when somebody's like, bring it on, and you're like, I'm on.
Right, just emotion and anger, which may be helpful in the battle, but still, he's still taking on a giant. And so the enemy is using that to entice the Israelites to come out and take him on. So it goes on to say this. Verse 9, if he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. And so he throws up a deal there. Here's the way it's going to work. That you beat the giant, we will be your servants. We beat you, the giant beats you, then you are our servants. And so the enemy here is the one who's drawing up the tactics of battle. He's the one that's laying out the requirements, as opposed to some kind of agreement that's been reached by the both of them. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. And the Philistine said, I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. And so what I want us to look at in this is behind the scenes of this. What are the tactics that the enemy is using to try to defeat Israel on this day? And it could have been successful if it wasn't for David, who comes along here shortly.